But anyway, sorry, enough about Dust Guy. Fuck, I've done 15 minutes on Dust Guy. Fuck. And I was planning to talk about Halle Berry's Bruised this week, because I meant to do it on Monday. I watched the film, and like the day later, I got ill, which could be something to do with rolling around with dudes half naked every day. But I suspect it was probably like the Havana syndrome that it gave me. It's just a bad, bad film. So we'll hopefully talk about that later. But it's a big week for the bantamweight division, and that means it's a big week for people who love fights. Because I can't think of a division that's more fun consistently than the bantamweight division. You've got so many good guys there. And yeah, it's all kicking off. We've got 2 different organizations doing big bantamweight events. Well, 3, I suppose. You could count Ryzen because they're they're pimping out Kyoji. So yeah, and now all these top people sort of interconnect in an interesting way. Because I was watching Rob Font fights, and I was like, well, I'll do Sergio Pettis next. But then I remembered they fought each other, so I watched that one as well. So I buried the lead here, but it's the Boicast. It's for the boys, and they understand that this is an informal setting. So what today we're talking about UFC Font versus Aldo, which is a good-looking card. Headlined obviously by Font versus Aldo in the bantamweight division, and those guys are both within grasping distance of a title shot, to be honest. And then in Bellator, you've got Sergio Pettis versus Kyoji Horiguchi. There's a couple of other interesting fights on that card. Well, I say interesting, middling interesting fights. You've got my boy Kai Kamaka, the third, has somehow ended up in Bellator. Alexander Shabli rather. A guy called Colin Huckbody, who I've never heard of, but a great name. Yeah, and Emmanuel Sanchez is fighting Jeremy. Yeah, we'll do all this in a minute. But it's a big weekend for bantamweights, and I hope it lives up to it. So we'll start with Font versus Aldo, because this seems like, Jose Aldo's last one against Pedro Munoz, I feel like I love that he's getting the respect that he deserves. This fight week has been like, it's Aldo fight week, everyone loves Aldo. And he's getting this respect he deserves as an old boy. I think he's only 31 or something like that now. But in fighting terms, he's an old boy. He's been around forever. He's fought everyone. He's lost a few recently, but like so many people have come into MMA in the last 5 years since he lost his title to Conor McGregor. A lot of people only knew him because he lost his title to Conor McGregor, but a lot of those people are now sort of discovering him, and they missed his decade of dominance. So for him to still be at this level in this game is absurd, because it's supposed to be doubly impossible in the lower weight classes because guys can actually fucking fight there. Heavyweight, you're expected to like pick up some losses in your 30s and then put it all together for your last run in in your late 40s. But with all of that said, and loving his performance against Pedro Munoz, I do think Pedro Munoz was a sort of perfect matchup to make Jose Aldo look good, because what Jose Aldo hates is volume, and what Pedro Munoz doesn't really have is any sort of combination work. He's a very much one-at-a-time fighter. He doesn't have, and not a lot of feints or effectiveness in like deceiving you either. It's like he has a good jab, but it's a single shot. He has a good right hand, but it's a single shot. He has a great low kick, but it's fucking Jose Aldo. You're not going to low kick him, especially not naked. So basically, Aldo had his way with Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz at the end basically said to him, which you can hear on the what was it, the Thrill in the Agony, whatever their post-fight program is. But there's a great clip of him just saying to Aldo, "You're the best, man. I think I need to go down to 125. You're too much better than me." It's like, well, that's not the issue there. The issue was that, like, anytime he did want to step in with more than one punch, Aldo just stepped in, hit him chest to chest, pivoted off, or came out of the clinch with a left hook. Like, it gave Aldo like the easiest boxing clinic of his life, and he did look better than ever, but it was also like very much that opponent made him look better than ever. And so much of Pedro Munoz's game relies on that low kick too. He used to rely almost entirely on like a low kick to the thigh, a naked low kick to the thigh, and then dudes would pick it up and try and take him down, and he'd guillotine them. If you watch his first couple of fights in the UFC, that's his whole game. So he's been working diligently on his boxing, but he also like found the calf kick. And if you watch his fight with Jimmy Rivera the second time, they're simultaneously kicking each other in the calf. It's the parody of, well, I mean, it's the meta becoming a parody of itself. Apparently meta stands for most effective tactics available. someone told me the other day, which might be bollocks. That might be just one of those things that people have made up in the aftermath, like posh, port out, starboard home. It's supposed to be like a cruising thing. But, the one thing that you're not going to catch Jose Aldo with is naked calf kicks. You can low kick him. I mean, Frankie Edgar couldn't miss the low kick when Aldo was pivoting off, because Aldo was so obsessed with pivoting off because all Frankie was offering him was straight line charges. And the low kick was always there. It's like Rob Whittaker against Uriah Hall. When someone pivots around that lead leg, they're taking themselves offline, they're making themselves hard to hit with punches, but they are completely exposing that leg in quite a precarious position. And any time Frankie went to it, he landed it. It's just he didn't really go to it very much in both fights. And I know people get pissed off with me talking about that again, but it's just like, kicking Jose Aldo in the legs is actually a good idea, especially if he's using his footwork a lot in the fight, which most fights he does. It's just that you don't, you're not going to catch him by doing it naked, which is a lot of the appeal of the calf kick. And we're going to get into this later with Kyoji Horiguchi versus Anthony Pettis. But a lot of the appeal of the calf kick is because you can do it against an opponent who's just like a mile away from you. It's the longest weapon you've got. It's artillery, basically, to chew up their leg and then you run in. Well, this is a World War I example, so you just get impaled on barbed wire and gunned down by a machine gun. But Aldo's not having that. He's got the jab, which is the other weapon at range, and guys will try and take away his jab by calf kicking him. And against Renato Moicano and Pedro Munoz, he's just like, nah, mate. And I wrote a big section on this in Advanced Striking 2.0, Jose Aldo, which you can go and read because you were a boy. Thought about opening it up, and then I was like, no, let's just keep it for the boys. I won't unlock it just yet. But I talk about like how his most recent defense against the calf kick, the calf kick. Well, he has two. One is to pick his leg up, and basically he picks his foot up and brings it back to his opposite knee. So his leg doesn't lift very much. It's just taking away the bottom half of it, because the traditional check, if you pick your leg up like you're doing Muay Thai or whatever, the guy will still clack through at shin height. He just gets lower on the shin, as opposed to if you're kicking above the knee, where they pick the leg up, you kick into the top of the shin/knee, break your own foot or shin, and it's all very embarrassing. But by taking the entire bottom of the leg away, the guy just fires underneath you. And there was some great moments in both the Moicano and the Munoz fight, but especially the Munoz fight. He withdraws the leg, Munoz kicks underneath it, and he just puts the leg back down. And the amount of pressure he generates, because Munoz has stepped all the way through, swung this kick, and everyone's been doing it with full commitment because you can get away with it. It's like, oh yeah, free, full power kick that no one's avoiding. And the moment it goes under and Aldo puts his foot back down, he's like, shit, I've just turned my back on Jose Aldo. And he just like runs away. And I think that's an important point of deterring future use of a technique that we don't often talk about enough. For like 2-3 years now. God, it's longer than that, because Cejudo versus DJ was like 4 years. Okay, so for like 5 to 6 years now, I've been saying, pull your fucking leg back. Just do like a Thai withdrawal of the lead leg. Pull it back underneath you, have both feet come level, But one of the things about dealing with the technique well, and we used to talk about this with like Killing the King, I'd say try and take away people's A games, and this is what we'd often talk about, but you don't want someone, like, it's cool to have a defense to something, but if it doesn't stop them doing it again, you have to be really fucking alert and dealing with it all the time. And that can make it very hard to actually get your offense going and do the other things that you set out to do in the fight. Ideally, your defenses should put pressure on the opponent that makes them not want to throw away techniques. The thing about the calf kick particularly is that guys are so comfortable just throwing it and being like, yeah, probably no bad outcome from that because the distance between us is as big as it can get, and still be able to throw the calf kick. It's guys are continually fucking around and there hasn't been much finding out, is how I describe it. Whereas this Aldo withdrawal, where he just hinges at the knee, he's still there. He's literally where he would have been, but he's taken the leg away and he's put it back down again. So the pressure is there. And that, again, made Pedro Munoz kick less. The other one that made him kick less was pivoting on the back foot, pulling his lead foot in and pointing his whole stance a few degrees, well, actually like 45 degrees, to the left. so that Munoz was kicking into the front of his shin with like the end of his foot. And that, I think that's going to be, if anyone fucking spots that technique, which again I featured heavily in Advanced Striking 2.0 Jose Aldo. But if guys start getting good at that, I think you'll see a lot less calf kicking in their, specifically the people who do it fights. I said it last week on the pod when I was taking questions, but you're going to start seeing some leg breaks soon. Well, actually, we've seen a couple, but at the moment, it's still guys trying to step in and take the kick, like Hall versus Weidman. And, there's another great example in Rivera versus Munoz, because I think that was one of the ones I used for my sketches in the Aldo one. If you try and step out into the kick, you're still picking up your leg to step into it. So your leg is not planted on the floor, and it's still probably going to hit you in the side of the leg quite a bit. So what you see is these guys trying to step into the kicks and just get knocked off balance. Even Hall, when he did try that against Weidman and successfully broke Weidman's shin, he was still falling over when he got kicked. But yeah, that sort of fucked up Pedro Munoz's whole day, because that's his one move. But Rob Font had some trouble with the calf kick against Cody Garbrandt, actually. That was something that worked very well for him. And who else did I see use it against him? Maybe Pettis? But yeah, he because he's bladed in his stance a lot of the time, because he's trying to reach out and jab a lot, the calf kick can be a pain for him. But what he does very well, and what is probably going to be horrible for Jose Aldo in this one, is that he presses himself right onto where he needs to be to just jab. And when I say just jab, I mean we talked about this a lot ahead of the Cody Garbrandt fight, and then it happened in the Cody Garbrandt fight, so we talked about it afterwards. But if you put yourself where you just have to reach out and jab, where it's literally just the extension of the arm, very, very difficult to pick up on that and react in time. It's a thing in boxing. Guys are much better in boxing, and guys are moving their head constantly in boxing anyway. But in MMA, guys use their feet, number one, to get out of the way, and a lot of it's just moving straight back and shit like that. But Cody Garbrandt, wickedly fast hands, considered a very fast guy in MMA, could not deal with Rob Font just closing the distance down on him over and over again. And Font's jab is beautiful anyway, because he'll show you shoulder feints as feints, but when he throws his hand, his shoulder doesn't move at all first. His hand goes out. It's one of those things that's quite hard to teach and learn, because when you jab, you want to get down behind your shoulder, because you're like, well, the jab is a lead. Everyone trains to counter the jab. If the right hand comes back over the top, I want to be down behind my lead shoulder. So you end up shrugging and throwing the jab, like the shrug is throwing the jab out. And really want the fist to go first, which is like the way you don't punch if you want any power. You want you want your weight driving the punch through. But to jab well in this sort of way, you want the fist to go first, like you're just trying to touch someone, which is why corners are always like, just touch him. But it's hard to do that without when you've been training to keep the shoulder up to protect yourself. And Font is the master at it in MMA. And that Cody Garbrandt fight is just a lesson in what MMA people think is boxing and what boxing is boxing. It's just like everyone who wasn't one of the analysts that I appreciate was convinced that Cody was going to bang him out really easily or meet him in a jabbing match and somehow win. And I've been saying for years, Cody Garbrandt has a good jab, but I've seen him use it twice ever. Font put on a masterclass in that fight. He used the jab lots, uses the right straight to the body wonderfully, which we always love. And the same thing happened in his Pettis fight. It's crazy to me that he got dinged by Pedro Munoz, because Pedro Munoz is a foot shorter reach, way slower. It's just not a great boxer, in terms of combination punching. But that's just how these things work. And it was a different time too. It was a few years ago. But one of the other things I was quite interested in Font is that he's not impossible to take down, but he is good and active off his back. Immediately starts elevating people with butterfly hooks. Cody got him down a good number of times, and Font made stuff happen, which I respected. Very good with the Kimura, which I really like. We talk a lot about how Kimuras don't tend to get finished in MMA, but you can use them really well to turn people over or lock their hands and start changing position. Whether that's a Kimura guard pass, like Paulo Filho used to do back in the day, or actually Davy Ramos did it too. Might have been Austin Hubbard. Or if you're on the bottom, you can use the half guard Kimura to start swinging over the top for an armbar, or elevating them with a butterfly hook. But there's a great sequence against, might have been Sergio Pettis actually. I think Pettis got him down, and he immediately grabbed an underhook and started butterfly sweeping him. Pettis popped up to his feet to try and stop being swept, or to stop having his arse lifted over his head, and Font immediately switched and underhooked the far leg and started pulling himself into Pettis' legs for like an X-guard or a leg attack, and Pettis immediately dropped back down to his knees, and as he dropped back down to his knees, Font wraps up the Kimura from what is like a butterfly half guard and tears it up behind his back. And that's such a cool time to grab a Kimura when guys are coming down from you attacking their legs. The trick with the Kimura is like you probably won't get the opportunity against really good guard passes. From half guard, that is. But there's a few tricks you can do. One of my favorite tricks is like to go to almost to do a half guard, but like high knee shield on the shoulder, and have your bottom leg that's between their legs have the knee inside their pelvis, so like the knee is blocking them from coming forwards. Guys just immediately start putting their hand and weight on your knee to try and force it down and step over it. And a lot of the time they'll just bow their elbow out and just like shoot the Kimura from there. Gary Tony used to have a great one where he sat up into octopus half, and they brought their hand back in front of his face and he grabbed the Kimura. But we're getting too into details here. But the thing is that I really like Font's bottom game, and he used the Kimura to turn over both Pettis and Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt in that fight, he came out, he did his sliding kick on his hand and knee, and then he slipped a punch as he was getting back to his feet, and then stayed low and hit the double leg and took Font down. I mean, he was getting his ass kicked, but he did do a real The Raid move, and I think that was absolutely cool. But yeah, all this is to say that, Font seems like a horrible matchup for Jose Aldo, because one of the things that Jose Aldo hates most in the world is volume and being forced to work. The thing about the Munoz fight was that he could break Munoz's forward movement whenever he wanted to. While Munoz was the one moving forward, it was Aldo who was basically like, yeah, I'm going to stand here and engage you now, and then maybe I'll clinch, maybe I'll turn, maybe I'll do whatever, but you're never going to throw more than 2 punches at me. Actually, Munoz had good success with the inside step-up low kick in that fight, which is something that Alexander Volkanovski used against Aldo to good effect, but Munoz didn't really do anything with it, whereas Volkanovski, of course, would build on it. You should know, like, even the Dan Henderson basic of if the inside low kick's landing, just come down with the overhand. just try. But that would break the rule of only throwing one attack at once. The balancing act, of course, is that to get Aldo to be Aldo more than he wants to be Aldo and to tire him out, you have to do shit. And to do that, you have to be able to move your head after your punches. You have to be able to get away from his counters. Because the issue is that, like, in the course of trying to tire him out, he's probably going to try and bang you. Like the first Holloway fight. Holloway gets his head jacked back hard at the end of the first round. And, it helps that Max Holloway has one of the all-time great chins. So it'll be very compelling to see if Font can keep the pace up and keep applying himself in the same way. He's not the kind of, both he and Jan are like guys who benefit from throwing a good amount of volume. But for Jan, you feel like the intention is always to just keep creating opportunities to hurt the guy. Font is a guy who very much hurts the opponent through landing an awful lot of things. Did I explain that very well? I just mean Jan is a bigger hitter, does damage with, it's more punctuated by good single blows, whereas Font's damage seems to be built up through doing lots of work. Certainly more in sort of a Max Holloway mold. But he can crack decently, whereas Max is not a great banger. But it's telling that of the 4 finishes Aldo has suffered, 3 of them have been just dragging him on, tiring him out, finishing him by him being tired, basically. I would be very interested to see Aldo low kicking and trying to use that in counter to Rob Font's jabs, as opposed to standing, slipping, and trying to come back with big counter shots all the time. But waiting for Jose Aldo to kick the legs is a fool's errand. I do desperately want to see how Font holds up to good body work, though, because if there's things that like you point out as an issue for a fighter, and that it's not easy to fix. The Jose Aldo struggling with volume and pace over time is not an easy fix. Because, you can't just say to a guy who's already in like his peak condition and getting older, oh, well, you need to be able to go longer and harder. It won't work. So, because some people are just machines cardio-wise, and other people are, good cardio-wise, but not like freakish. So then it's a case of like, how do you break pressure? You could be like, well, you need to knock him out early, but this is a 5-round fight. And if he's a tough guy, you're going to get into the 3rd and 4th. Can you tie him off, cut him up, hit him with your shoulder, turn, things like that? Frankie Edgar, Pedro Munoz. Those guys, yes, absolutely he could, and they couldn't do shit about it. Frankie Edgar can drive a mean pace on the elliptical, I'm sure, but, running in on straight lines and getting turned every time is not the way to impart that pace on Jose Aldo. But then you've got instances where you go, that could be a fix, but he's not even trying, and that's things like the takedowns. So seldom does Jose Aldo actually attempt takedowns. It's another one of those very frustrating things because he's always been an amazing top player. He's been a great ground and pounder. He has the best takedown defense and get-ups in possibly the division's history. Any division he fights in. Worst comes to worst, he botches a takedown and ends up on the bottom. He's Jose Aldo. He'll be up pretty soon, So it's continually frustrating that he doesn't go to takedown attempts very often. But as I was saying, like, there's not an awful lot of answers you can give them if those aren't options. One of the things you can say, where if you're trying to win a striking match over the distance against someone who drives a higher pace than you, has better cardio, has more volume than you, is to make the punches count for more. Now, one way would be to swing for their head as hard as possible, which has been Aldo's solution against Max Holloway, which didn't really work, or hit the body. Because that every punch you hit him with in the body takes away some of his ability to punch you in the head, or at least is going to move him towards being tired far more than you missing punches to the head is. And Aldo is a sensational body hitter. His work against Chito Vera most recently was excellent. Coming back with 2-punch combos to the body, great shout. And Rob is a fairly big guy for this division. He's very skinny for the division. So, our bro science tells us hit skinny dudes in the body. But yeah, if he can get to that early and often, and the counter, the switch knees as he's coming in and shit like that, I could see that leveling things out, conditioning wise. And then it's a case of like, can Rob continue to drive the pace through those counters, through those body shots rather. And of course, like the case is always that Aldo could just bang him out on the counter. It really is like, yeah, you can give Aldo a horrible time with your jab, but you do need to get away from his responses, and you really are going to have to play it safe for like 3, maybe 4 rounds. And that's the great dilemma of it. How do you play it safe and drive a pace? But anyway, yes, I suspect that Rob is going to be a very difficult matchup for Aldo. If Aldo wins this one, it'll either be very impressive because he's come up with something new, or very impressive because like his usual stuff worked against a guy who seems like a stylistically horrible matchup for him. So the other big bantamweight matchup of the weekend is Kyoji Horiguchi versus Sergio Pettis.